Imagine a single word: purity. For many, it instantly conjures images of untouched innocence, a sacred moral high ground, often inextricably linked to virginity or sexual restraint. It feels ancient, almost like a natural law of human conduct, dictating right from wrong in the realm of desire. But what if I told you this deeply ingrained idea isn't some universal, timeless truth, but a meticulously constructed, ever-shifting social concept? What if its history is far stranger, more political, and profoundly more manipulative than you've ever realized, quietly shaping our most intimate desires and choices, even today?
Today, we'll strip back centuries of cultural conditioning to uncover the true, often surprising, origins of purity. We'll trace its astonishing journey from ancient rituals to the modern anxieties of online dating, revealing how societies relentlessly wielded this concept to control desire, shape relationships, and rigorously define what was considered good or bad. We'll expose the hidden mechanisms by which these invisible rules were enforced, often with profound and sometimes devastating consequences for individuals. And by the end, you'll gain a startling new perspective on how these historical constructs continue to govern our deepest urges, often without us even consciously knowing it. Prepare to question everything you thought you knew about one of humanity's most potent and enigmatic ideals, and brace yourself for a revelation about its true, enduring power.
Our journey begins not with abstinence, but with ritual. In many ancient cultures, purity had little to do with sex and everything to do with sacredness, cleanliness, and maintaining cosmic order. Consider the ancient Egyptians, where priestly purity involved stringent dietary restrictions, ritual baths, and specific garments, all ensuring one was fit to approach the divine. Or recall early tribal societies, where states like menstruation or childbirth rendered individuals ritually impure, not morally tainted, but temporarily set apart, brimming with powerful, perhaps even dangerous energies that required careful management. It was a temporary state, a condition tied to sacred boundaries and natural cycles, not a permanent label of moral worth or an innate flaw. But how did this nuanced understanding transform into something far more rigid and condemning? The monumental shift arrived with the gradual ascendancy of monotheistic religions. Here, purity began to intertwine deeply with abstract notions of morality and, crucially, with human sexual conduct. For women specifically, virginity became increasingly valorized. The sacred was no longer just about ritual cleanliness. It became a moral imperative, an inner state often reflected, or more accurately, enforced through stringent sexual behavior. This wasn't a sudden cataclysmic change, but a slow, profound redefinition that meticulously laid the theological and social groundwork for centuries of sexual regulation and expectation. By the medieval period, and profoundly intensified in the Victorian era, purity, almost exclusively female sexual purity, had cemented its place as an absolute cornerstone of social order and personal reputation. A woman's honor became inextricably linked to her chastity, directly impacting her family's status, her marriage prospects, and even her economic survival. Men, of course, were conveniently held to a different, far looser standard, often engaging in behaviors that would utterly ruin a woman. This wasn't merely about individual virtue. It was a sophisticated social technology for controlling inheritance, consolidating property, and maintaining power structures. The consequences of failing this purity test were dire, often leading to social ostracization and economic ruin. But how did such a rigid and often hypocritical framework manage to persist? And what were its hidden human costs? Even as the Age of Enlightenment championed reason, scientific inquiry, and individual liberty, the concept of purity didn't vanish. It cleverly adapted. It morphed into a crucial marker of middle-class respectability, a public performance of moral rectitude, essential for upward mobility in an increasingly urbanized and anonymous world.
While outwardly promoting stringent virtue, this era often saw rampant hypocrisy, with bustling red light districts and pervasive prostitution flourishing alongside the most fervent calls for female purity. The ideal became less about genuine inner state and more about outward appearance, social standing, and maintaining a facade, demonstrating its remarkable adaptability as a tool of social stratification and control. The emphasis shifted from spiritual cleanliness to social cleanliness, serving an entirely new purpose.
The mid-20th century, particularly the seismic 1960s sexual revolution, seemed poised to utterly dismantle the entire edifice of purity culture. The widespread availability of contraception, radical shifts in gender roles, and a burgeoning emphasis on individual liberation challenged traditional norms head-on. Virginity lost some of its sacred aura, and open, albeit often awkward, discussions about sex became more common. Yet even in this era of widespread rebellion against old guard values, purity didn't disappear entirely. It merely shapeshifted, perhaps becoming less about explicit legal or religious rules and more about subtle societal expectations, internalized shame, and the constant unspoken pressure to conform to new, yet still restrictive, ideals of sexual expression and desirability. The language changed, but the underlying sentiment often lingered. So where does purity stand in our hyper-connected, supposedly liberated 21st century? In an age of unprecedented sexual freedom, ubiquitous pornography, and open discussions about identity, its influence remains surprisingly potent and often insidious. It lurks in online dating profiles, where certain types are valorized or dismissed based on subtle cues related to perceived sexual history. It manifests in internalized shame, the pressure to conform to specific sexual timelines, or the discomfort many still feel discussing their authentic desires openly, even with partners. Even in secular societies, the echoes of historical purity culture profoundly shape our self-worth, our relationships, and our very perception of intimacy. It's no longer about a white dress, but about unspoken anxieties, unconscious biases, and the fear of being too much or not enough. The insidious power of purity culture lies in its ability to become deeply internalized, shaping our self-perception and our understanding of desire from a remarkably young age. It can foster profound guilt, chronic shame, and debilitating anxiety around natural human impulses, leading to repression, unhealthy sexual dynamics, or a profound disconnect from our authentic selves. This inherited framework can make us question our worth, our desirability, and even our basic human needs. Understanding its complex historical and social construction is the absolutely crucial first step towards dismantling these invisible barriers, allowing us to cultivate a more honest, compassionate, and ultimately authentic relationship with our own sexuality and with others. It's about reclaiming agency over our bodies, our desires, and our stories. The enduring, evolving story of purity is a profound testament to humanity's endless capacity for inventing rules and meanings around our most fundamental urges. It reminds us with startling clarity that what we often perceive as innate, natural, or divinely ordained is frequently a carefully constructed artifact of culture, power, and historical circumstance. By recognizing purity not as an absolute, but as a dynamic social tool with a rich, often problematic past, we gain the critical power to question its modern manifestations and to forge a more liberated, self-aware understanding of desire. But if purity is such a potent, historically constructed concept, what other fundamental aspects of our relationships and our inner lives are we taking for granted? Consider how our understanding of love itself might also be a meticulously woven tapestry of historical beliefs and cultural narratives, shaping our expectations and even our heartbreaks in ways we rarely explore. Perhaps that's a story for another time, one that continues our journey